Hello and welcome to Tete-a-tech. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Rishad Premji, Executive Chairman at Wipro, to Tete-a-tech. I'm going to start by a few questions in the beginning, which is getting to know Rishad. So, where can we find you if you're not at work?
Oh gosh, on a beach with not too many people.
A tech must-have in your bag.
Of course, a Microsoft Surface Pro.
One tip to ace hybrid work.
I haven't figured it out.
Your favorite role in life? Leader, dad, son, co-worker, anything else?
Oh gosh. All of them in moderate proportion, right?
One leadership quote that you hold in highest regard.
To whom much is given, much is expected.
So, Rishad, you have a very unique global view on the tech evolution of the planet and for India. So, what are the top 2 or 3 trend lines that you see that will define the Indian IT industry in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. First of all, I'm very bullish on the Indian IT industry. I really feel the runway over the next 3 to 5 years is tremendous. And it's been partly helped by 2 things, I think. One is this whole move to digital. I'll explain to you what I think by the word digital. For me, digital is being more customer-centric, being more employee-centric, all about experiences, being agile, being able to scale, about speed, about being customer-obsessed. So I think there's a huge opportunity that has emerged and was emerging even before COVID. I think COVID just accelerated that journey of moving to this digital-first world, right? And that includes moving to the cloud and leveraging data more smartly and cybersecurity and all of that. And I think so there's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity because industries and customers and countries that were not focused on it now have no choice but to be focused on it. So there's been a tremendous acceleration over the last 2 to 3 years, particularly during COVID, that's driving that. And I think there's a great opportunity for Indian companies to participate in that. The second is this big change on talent, Anant. People came to India back in the day for cost. They stayed for quality, and then they realized it was a great experience to work with Indian companies. Today, that conversation doesn't happen because the conversation is about where is talent. And so people don't talk about India in the context of cheaper or not cheaper. Yeah. People talk about India in the context of where talent is available. And it's a profound change. You never have this conversation about cost in the sense that you're coming to India because of cost. You're really coming to India because that's where people are at the moment. And so that combination of talent availability, a great commitment from the industry as well as from government to help with talent, and this huge transition to digital, I think, presents a tremendous opportunity for Indian technology companies.
Now, as a pioneer of this industry over the last 5 decades now, you have taken on this role and you're now repositioning Wipro to distinguish from some of the peers who may not have made this transition of truly being global companies and really leading that way. How do you see that move happening at an industry level and specifically for Wipro?
Given this backdrop of this opportunity, our focus is shifting, again, very purposefully to how do we play the role of an ecosystem orchestrator. Because what is happening with this digital journey change, I find, is large enterprises have a lot of old stuff. They have legacy which they cannot let go of completely. There's a lot of new opportunity with new digital partners, new products, new offerings. And how do you make sense of it all? So how do you make sense of legacy coming together with different partners offering different things and creating actual value for the customer? So I think there's a tremendous opportunity to play the orchestrator role. And SIs like us that are not biased, have no favoritism, and bring the best of breed mindset to the table, I think create a huge opportunity. So our journey is how do we play this value orchestrator or ecosystem orchestrator. And we're doing a couple of things in the organization to enable that more strongly, right? One is we've reorganized completely by markets as opposed to industry. We find that's a tremendous opportunity to show up closer to customers, to build more intimacy. The second is partnerships. Partnerships have changed. We had 4 people supporting our Microsoft partnership. We have 20 people supporting it today purposefully, right? It's our largest growing partnership, so it's incredibly, incredibly important to us. 60% of our revenue comes from partnerships, and how do we make that show up? And then, how do we build a much stronger industry understanding? How do we become much, much more domain-led? How do we become much more consultative? And that comes through organic build and through M&A as well. It's been really a really good year in consulting. So how do you show up with a strong understanding of the business? How do you show up with strong partners? And how do you show up with proximity? I think that's what we're on this journey of driving. So that's one element. The other, I think, which is also important, Anant, is who you are as an organization and what you stand for. I think it's tremendously important. You know, I think we have two advantages, and I'm saying this with all modesty. One is the fact that we're owned 66% of the economic interest of Wipro is owned by a foundation.
Yes.
That matters tremendously to employees. It matters tremendously to customers. It's remarkable how much it matters to customers. It's remarkable how much customers tell us, why aren't you talking about this enough, right? And where, you know, I'm a big disbeliever in humble bragging. So, you know, we are trying to strike the right balance between talking about ourselves, but not over-talking about it. I think that matters tremendously. Our whole commitment with companies like Microsoft on sustainability and transforming to net zero. We have a deep commitment on diversity, right? And not because, I'm a big believer, not because we want to meet metrics. You know, I had a board member once said this to me, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we were having a chat, and I said to him, you know, when I'm looking to hire someone, I'm looking to find commonality. Is this the kind of person I could have coffee with? And he said to me, Rishad, that's the completely wrong way to look for people. So I said, why? He said, you should be looking for people who are very different than you, who challenge you, who make you uncomfortable, right? Who shake up your status quo. And that comes from diversity. Diversity of experiences, of gender, of ethnicity, of sexual orientation. So we're being very purposeful about that as well. And those things are, I'm realizing, are becoming table stakes in terms of play.
Totally.
But I think very powerful. So those are also important ingredients, I think, of how we try and differentiate ourselves as well outside of the business differentiators.
So, Rishad, my first introductions with you at NASSCOM, and I heard you speak about culture, about the industry, and then when you came and took this role, we see it a lot more as a partner. You're driving this cultural transformation. You're passionate about this. You have created this whole turning point of Wipro in terms of its culture. And a natural question is, what caused that epiphany?
Yeah.
What caused that thinking in you as a leader to say, we need to transition this, we need to drive this, this particular change? Let's just talk a little bit about that.
Look, you know, when I took over in 2019, and I'd been at Wipro for 12 years, and you know, we had a tough decade. We hadn't done well, and everybody in the organization believed that we had great stuff, great ingredients, right? Maybe not great ingredients, decent ingredients. And I was not able to understand why decent ingredients doesn't produce a decent dish consistently for those many years between 2010 and 20 or 19 at that point in time. And I realized that perhaps something was happening in the kitchen. Perhaps something was happening in the way we worked, in the way we came together, in the space design, in the roles and responsibilities. And so I spent a lot of time with our top 30 people one-on-one. I must have spent 50 hours with them one-on-one, just trying to understand what was happening. And we came to this realization that something was definitely happening in the kitchen, right? We were not showing up as one team. There was a lot of siloism. People were trust deficit, right? People didn't want to help other parts of the organization if there was no benefit for me. People were very much focused about them and their P&L, even if Wipro wasn't winning overall. So we realized that we had to sort of do something about driving a mindset of one Wipro, trust, collaboration, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the genesis, right? The other big learning I had is people don't, so we have articulated our values as a company from 1971. And my big learning, which is actually quite basic, but was a big learning for me, was people don't experience your values. They experience your behaviors. And as a consequence of which they interpret whether you live your values or don't live your values, right? So for example, you may say, I'm respectful as an organization, but if you are rude and abrasive and don't listen and are not inclusive, then you're not demonstrating respect, even though you may say respect, or you don't give honest feedback, for example, to people, to me, which is a core part of respect. So we realized that, you know, it was so important for us to show up in terms of how we live these behaviors every day. And the beauty of behaviors is you can control them. You can control them even if you're not experiencing them, right? That's the beauty, and it starts with you. So I keep telling people it starts with you because you can change your behaviors and create an amazing experience for your team, even though you may not be experiencing it from your peers, from your boss, from your boss's boss. And that's the beauty of behavior. So we were, again, that was the journey we came up with. So we thought there was a need to lay a foundation for how we show up before we drive business differentiation. If we can't come together as a team, we're never going to win. And my learning for that has only gotten stronger over COVID, because you realize culture truly eats strategy for breakfast. Strategies can come and go, smart investments can come and go, but if you have a toxic environment that's broken, that's so hard to change and fix.
Absolutely. At Microsoft, as you know, and you've been a big sort of advocate as well as somebody who studied this in question on looking at the Microsoft transformation from the outside. I remember your conversations that you had with Satya even at the CEO Summit. So it's really something that connects and binds us. Now, in an organization with more than 240,000 people, and 100,000 of them came in the last 2 years, you're now asking people to change behaviors and learn new behaviors when 15% of people are showing up in person. So it's a lot of it is happening virtually as you're working with them. How do you even think about what are those 5 behaviors?
So one is just having 100,000 new people is an enormous challenge, right? Because you have 100,000 people who don't know the company, who get a paycheck from the company, who perhaps engage with 1 or 2 or 3 people, so have no sense of the smell of the organization. And getting the smell of the organization is incredibly important. So I think it's really important that all of our people come back some of the time, right? Because culture grows through gossip. So-and-so is doing this, or so-and-so did that. Those are important things. No, I'm serious. I think they're so important. That's how people function in their normal life. No, people are not perfect. People talk like that, right? Yeah. And you can't dismiss that. So the 5 habits are, one is about being respectful, and being respectful is about simply being respectful, but also giving direct feedback, listening, being inclusive. Second habit is about being responsive, not only to your customers, but also to your employees, and making decisions with speed, unafraid. One of the biggest challenges in organizations I find is people wait for perfect information to make decisions. You don't have perfect information, you make decisions. The third is always communicating constantly. I'm a big believer there's no such thing as over-communication. You can never communicate enough. So communicating, and especially communicating bad news. Good news flows. You have to make sure bad news flows faster. You have to make sure a level 1 escalation doesn't become a level 5 escalation because you're not communicating enough. So communication is absolutely key. Fourth one is about demonstrating stewardship, which is about putting the company first. Yeah. Wipro comes first always. Nobody wins if the company doesn't win. It means you have a can-do attitude. It means you're not cynical. The last is about building trust. And that's very hard to do in an environment where people are new, right? Where people don't know. Somebody said this to me very interestingly. An American gentleman, he'd been at Wipro for 5 years. He said, Wipro's a very funny place. He says, at Wipro you have to have social equations to build trust. Whereas at most other organizations, you come with competency and capability. You demonstrate competency and capability, as a consequence of which you build trust, as a consequence of which you build a social equation. Whereas at the organization, it happens the other way around. And so when you don't know 100,000 people, you have to start from a place of trust. If you believe you've come in to do an honest day's worth of work, and you have the trust of your manager, and you have the trust of the organization, you have to afford the same trust to somebody else. So that's the habits. How do you infuse them? You connect with people. You talk to people constantly. So I have done now personally 96 or 97 sessions. I've probably spent over 300 hours personally. I have met 29,000 colleagues. And I tell stories. And I think people remember stories. People don't remember businessy stuff on a PowerPoint presentation, right? That's the reality. People don't remember those things.
Leadership insights, and how would you think about 2 or 3 things if you had to say? What would they be?
Oh, gosh. No, I'll tell you, my personal style is authenticity is the most, you got to show up the way you are. That's the most important thing. I was just mentoring a bunch of women leaders from NASSCOM. And the only thing I said, you got to show up the way you are. Don't try and be somebody you're not. People read through that immediately. Yeah. Any smart, reasonably smart person with an average EQ reads through that, right? You got to show up the way you are. That's the most important thing. My style is very empathetic and vulnerable. It's not afraid to say I don't know. It's not afraid to say I need help. It's not afraid to say I don't have the answers. So that's my style. And just showing up the way you are, and that's the only way you can show up. That's one. 2 is, I think, the importance of treating people well, right? And I think COVID has really taught us that. You have to really care about your people. I really feel people leave organizations for a lack of that. They certainly leave organizations for better opportunity and better compensation, but they leave organizations because they don't have a sense of connectedness, because they don't have a sense of belonging, right? Somebody has to stand up and say, look, I care that you exist, that you're happy, that you enjoy your job, even though you may be the junior most person in the organization. So I think a strong sense of care for people, I think, is incredibly important.
Rishad, thank you so much for joining us at Tete-a-tech and sharing your views on culture and leadership. And thank you all for joining us today.